Hello, everyone. Tracy here, your resident business rebel, and you're listening to Digital Business Your Way. Welcome to our special limited series, Launch Style Stories. In this series, we're diving deep into the true stories behind launching, what it's like to find your way the hard way, and what happens when you finally discover a launch style that fits. You'll hear from entrepreneurs who've been through, some miserable experiences, those who are still figuring it out, and those who found their groove and finally feel like they're thriving. Because launching isn't one size fits all, and there's not only one way to do it. And I believe it doesn't have to feel like denying yourself to make money or just feel exhausting and something that you have to get through. This series is all about exploring what works, what doesn't, and how you can cut through the guesswork quicker to find your way and your style sooner. So settle in, because these stories might just change the way you look at launching and your business.
Like for us, a launch is our number one best list builder. So it is, it's typically, if it's a webinar, if it's a masterclass, if it's a training series, like we are giving value. It's way better than a lead magnet, than a standard lead magnet. Like we are bringing people in that are coming in. We're very specific on a transformation, a promise. And the cool thing is if somebody comes in during that launch, you're influencing them and you're training them from the moment that they come into your world that you're an expert and you sell the thing that you do for a living.
Today on Launch Style Stories, I'm joined by Paul Pruitt, a lifelong entrepreneur who has built multiple multi-million-dollar businesses across real estate, photography, and online education. Together with his wife and business partner, Melissa Pruitt, they run the Adaptive Marketing Program, where I guest coach, helping online entrepreneurs market and sell their offers with strategy and intention. But here's what's really interesting. Paul and Melissa have launched in so many different ways over the years, from big webinar style launches to small strategic sales cycles. And through it all, they've learned that the best launch strategy is the one that actually fits your business, your audience, and your energy. In this conversation, Paul and I talk about how he and Melissa have navigated launching across different industries, why the best marketing strategy often comes before you ever think about a launch, and the lessons they've learned from both high and low points in their entrepreneurial journey. If you've ever felt like launching is overly complicated or you're trying to figure out what actually works for you, well, this episode is for you. Let's listen in. Well, thank you very much for being here, Paul. I know that we've known each other for a while now, with you and Melissa and all of the iterations that we have gone through together as I've guest coached inside of Adaptive. And I've seen it go from course to, I would say it probably might more expansive membership. I don't even know what you want to officially title it as. I just enjoy being in there and seeing all the people that you attract. But I know that comes from the different styles of launching and the different things that you have gone into and that you have brought, right? Yeah. So I'm really curious, how did you first get into it? Because you didn't wake up one day and decide to do digital. This wasn't your first business. You've been an entrepreneur 3, 4, 5, 17 times, right? Yeah. So whenever you moved into this digital space, were you sitting there going, oh, I know how to launch. That's just a marketing promotion. I've done this in real estate. I've done this in photography. This is so easy. Or was it what is happening right now? What are these people doing and talking about?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, thank you for having me on. Melissa and I love everything that you bring into our world. And I know it's changed a lot of lives with people, our clients and members and stuff too. And it's interesting because I did go right out of high school. I'm going to age myself here, but in 1992, I went right out of high school, right into real estate. And I've been self-employed my entire adult life.
That's right.
And the term launch and funnels and all this stuff, I feel like in the last 15-ish plus or minus years have become the buzzwords. And you know how it is in this internet marketing space where if you name it, you claim it. So it's just make up a new name for something that exists already, and then it's suddenly you own it, type thing. And really, when I started hearing the word launch and everything, there's certain people that are known for that word, coined it more or less in the space. But it's really, to me, it's a timed promotion. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
there's a start, there's an end, there's a runway, but at the end of the day, it's like, launches have been forever. So, at least within the marketing world, it's like you sit down with a marketing department or an agency, like back in the day before all this internet stuff, and you would plan out a true real world product launch where there was like a new soda for Coca-Cola or a new iPhone launch type thing. It just happens all the time in the real world. But most of us as entrepreneurs, we lack the planning a lot of times, the
Yeah.
intentionality behind our marketing and our sales processes, and actually even just saying the word processes, like most people look at marketing and sales and don't realize it is a step-by-step process. And I think coming into this online marketing space, I think the thing that caught me off was that we're in real estate. If you want a predictable result, when you did presentations or handling objections, back in the day, you used to do role playing, and you would know, okay, if you say these type of things, you're probably going to get a better result. And if you say these things, you're probably not going to get as good a result. So salespeople would practice and role play and get better at their presentations, at their methodology of marketing and sales, so that they would refine, their thing. And the interesting thing is, when you come into this internet marketing space, there is no like one size fits all for anyone. Everybody comes in it for a different reason, and they don't necessarily have the skill sets of understanding marketing and sales. So it's easy for us to buy formulas and processes and steps
Yes.
and shiny objects that we almost want to make the world's best chocolate chip cookie, but we want to buy the baker's chocolate chip and look at the back and do the recipe that's on it. But that's not going to make us like the master baker of the world. We're not going to get an award, but we're going to get something predictable. And so the interesting thing is just, we've done a lot of different type of launches. And the irony, I was just talking to Melissa about this a couple days ago. Melissa's my wife and business partner. And it's like, isn't it funny that before we bought into and learned all these launch methods, it was so much easier, and we did better because we weren't trying to do things really formally. Like, okay, there's supposed to be these 5-step now. I understand processes and things we can shortcut and learn through the other people's experience, but it's just interesting that I think some people think like there's only one way to do it. Because this person sold a course or a program on this methodology, and if you break the rule, like, you're not going to be successful. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, there's tens of thousands of people that might have went through the most successful course or program out there that's about launching, but there's 8 billion people on Earth. And it's like, okay, so 99.999% of all the business owners in the world have never been exposed to this launch method, even though their businesses around the world are successful. So, but it's just one of those things. It's interesting just coming in, and it's like, okay, I know how to do marketing and sales, how to do promotions, be strategic about the promotions. I did that, as you said, like I used to own 8 real estate offices. I bought the company I worked for when I was younger, and went from 1 office and 16 agents to 8 offices and over 200 agents. And we had to meet everybody where they were. And I think that's why you were struggling a little bit. Like, okay, you don't have a membership. It's kind of a coaching, but it's like, so what we do in
It's
our
an all-in-one, right?
Yeah. Well, it's because it has nothing to do with the internet marketing space. I did it based on how, we built our real estate company. We had a vested interest in all of our agents because we split a commission. So if they didn't produce, so they didn't sell, then we would fail as a company. So we didn't like just teach at or speak at people. We were actually in partnership with everybody that we taught. So we had this vested interest in their success. And so we kind of brought that hybrid, into this internet marketing space with our own program. But we ourselves launch a lot of different ways. We have, we probably would consider the traditional style, multi-training videos over a series of a week and a half style. And we have some that are email only and very light. We've done challenges and boot camps in the middle. We've done webinars. And it's really funny because coming back to what I was saying a minute ago is approximately 10 years ago, when Melissa and I started dating, I was already doing webinars at the time, and a gentleman by the name of Casey just came out with this software called Easy Webinar at the time, and he used us as a case. He used us as a case study because we were doing $35,000 webinars. We made several $100,000 on the launch of a course that we did in the photographer space. that particular year, 10 years ago. And we were like one of his like shine because he just came out with software and he like used us as a case study. And that was just me just knowing how to do presentations in the real estate world and just applying all the basic principles, the first principles of foundational elements when it comes to presentations and everything, and just applying it into a webinar. And then the funny thing is like we got less effective when we start consuming everybody's $2,000 course telling us, oh, no, this is how you're supposed to do the webinars. This is how you're supposed to launch. These are the things you're supposed to do. So I'm sorry, I can rattle on forever.
No, I mean,
ways.
Yeah. And that, but you hit on it, right? Because there is this comfort of being like, oh, okay, these people have had these types of results doing it this kind of way.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of emotions around having this kind of business, right? Because I'm either expanding or I'm trying something new, or, there's this vulnerability attached to doing a business, right? To being an entrepreneur, to putting your neck out there.
Sure.
Yeah. And I mean, by now you've had a lot of years of practicing with that, but people have come from all over. They've come from corporate, they've come from high school, they've come from, everywhere in between. And they're sitting there going, how am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to buy food? How am I going to take care of my kids? How am I going to save face?
Yeah.
Right. Because they have all these stakeholders and they're like, I have to make sure this works.
Yeah.
And this person is selling me a message telling me this works.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shut down what I know, or maybe I don't even feel like I know something, and I'm going to buy in and I'm going to go in because I want to be that testimony. I want to be that case study. I want to be that, right?
Yeah.
And for you were able to model and to see, oh, that is just like this expertise that I can bring over. Yeah.
True.
Whereas with some people, especially with this vocabulary difference, it's like, wait, I know that word, but not how this person's using it. It's like, wait, I've heard this word, but not in that context.
Yeah.
Then there's kind of this disconnect and people lose faith. And they're like, well, this feels familiar, but I'm not quite sure what to do. So they outsource that agency, right? They outsource that decision making. And again, they're not sure.
True.
Right. And so it takes that experimentation. It takes that building of faith in yourself. And that's why, like we always talk about in entrepreneurship, you will do more development in your own human being as an entrepreneur than you will in anything else, right? There will be more mindset work. There will be more internal struggle. There will be more, what the hell am I doing? And yes, I can take on the world like in an hour than there is doing like most other jobs, right?
Sure.
And it's because everything falls on you,
Sure.
but at the same time, you have the freedom to do whatever you want. And it's this kind of tension that's built into everything that, especially given the cultures that most of us grew up in, we kind of don't know what to do with that, right? So when we're fed these messages of, oh, here's the answer, here's the answer, here's the answer, and we're taught to listen to authority. So we're like, oh, grand. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Yeah. So you guys, 10 years. 10 years to be like, oh yeah, okay, we did it this way when we were innocents and we didn't know any better. And it worked so well that these people were using us as case studies. Then we started going, oh, but we want something different. So let's try something different. Now let's listen to these other people because we want these things that other people have. And then it's almost this kind of like 180 of coming back to yourself, right? Is that kind of a appropriate representation of what you two have kind of gone through?
Yeah. If you think about it, most things in life do go full circle, in business, in life also. And I think if you look at different elements of life, it's like, okay, we probably just as much tension, just in a different way, that when we were a child and we got on a bicycle for the first time, or some of us maybe jumped in a swimming pool and didn't know if we were going to float or die, type feel. Yeah. It's like we had these traumatic moments in our lives that I think freeze us and put us in that paralyzation stage. And because a lot of us, I think we lack the patience of failing forward, okay, we want it to be perfect. And it's like, okay, well, the first time we got on that bike, we fell, we skinned our knees. We didn't ride it like the older kids rode it. We had to have the training wheels and we were embarrassed, somebody had to hold the back of it. We had to do it over and over and over again so we could get that natural feedback, that experience. But if we sat there and read in a book how to ride a bike over and over and over again. We would have been even more in our heads because we would have had imposter syndrome. Like, I know all the things I'm supposed to do, but then we would have probably been even more afraid to get on the bike to even try. But it's like everything in life, probably the first person we ever went up and asked to go on a date with, or, going up and speaking in front of a room of people for the first time, like all those things that are like that everybody's deathly afraid of, where, you grow up in life and it's like, nobody's ever ready for their first child. Nobody's ever ready for a house. Nobody's ever ready to move out of their parents' house. But the interesting thing is when we do get out of our comfort zone, we typically grow into a new version of ourselves because we have experience, we have perspective, like we have something. But most of us are chasing we're afraid of rejection. So we want to buy all the courses and become a perpetual student and not take a step forward. It's very safe, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think we're told things growing up, like knowledge is power, and it's like, well, knowledge coupled with action is power.
Yes.
Those people we know people that know a lot, but they're just not further ahead in life. Like they're the smartest people, but they just don't apply any of it, and every day, I'm sure, even though we're not supposed to, but because of social media, it's so easy that we can see other people progressing. We can see other people making movement and having wins and everything. And really 99% of those people are just like ourselves. They just put in that 10,000 hours and they just took a risk. They went out on stage the first time and got laughed at. They got on the bike and fell down. They did the equivalent of jumping in the swimming pool, not knowing what's going to happen, And I think we do that as children, and we do that to our children or others growing. But then we lose that somewhere along the way, like, the tension of being responsible for our family. We need to get this perfect. But then like 6 months go by and you didn't launch. A year, 2 years go by, you didn't launch. You're sitting there, high-fiving virtually other people in Facebook groups that you're quietly judging because they did launch. But they had that small. So for Melissa and I, like we've done a lot of multi-six-figure launches over the years, but our first launch was to 3 people that said yes, to 3 people. And Melissa and I talk about it all the time. And it's like, man, if it wasn't for those 3 people, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think there's that double-edged blade, the fear of failure. So that holds a lot of people back, the fear of rejection and failure, so that holds people back, being afraid. But then there's that counterbalance of, even because a lot of people are prepared to get launched, like they do all the things and then they just never push the button, to actually have it going. Because I think there's a counterbalance on the other side of that double-edged blade is the fear of acceptance. And it's like, oh my goodness.
What if I do well?
Yeah. Well, I think there's a piece right before that, because they might not know how to handle that. And there might be some conflicting things, but it's like imposter syndrome. Like if I do a successful launch and people buy prepared for that, like they are comfortable in their life, their lifestyle, the choices they made. Sometimes we have head junk in, is like, from our, being younger, that, we shouldn't, be boastful. We shouldn't talk about money. We shouldn't, all these. So there's these different external things, I think, that pop in along the way as well.
Yeah. And then like all of it shows up every time you try to go do something, right? And then it's one of those things where it's like, you don't have to get stuck in it. It's just realizing it and then allowing yourself to move past it, right? It's expanding around it versus letting it become your swamp, because we could spend a lifetime noticing every single thought that comes up. Or it's like, oh, okay, yep, that's a thought. Nope, I'm not going to grab it. I'm just going to let it float by. And be like, okay, bye. All right, there it goes, like a little balloon, bye. Instead of, trying to grab it and be like, oh, and then here's another one. Oh, and here, okay, now let me go in and analyze all of these things, and then I'm just going to sit here forever. And in addition to being a student, I'm going to analyze the hell out of everything. And then I'm never, ever, ever going to go anywhere. But I can tell you exactly why I don't go anywhere, and because it's like, and that becomes a whole other trap in itself, right? So it's kind of that we can set ourselves up trying to do better. Yeah. And that's where like having that kind of accountability and having some place where it's like, where can I, go? Who can I be vulnerable with? What can I say? So is it a peer group? Is it a partner? Is it a friend? Who can you talk about these things with? Because you have to have that place of safety, that place of vulnerability, where it's like these things are coming up and people are like, oh yeah, you too. And you're like, oh, you mean I'm not the only one? Yeah, I was in my peer mastermind the other day, and this woman, she was like, I don't even know exactly how to express it, but I've already done really well in a launch, but now I have to actually teach them, and I can't do it. And we were like, oh yeah, it's the fear of success, right? It's like, now you need to deliver on it. She goes, oh my God, this is a thing? And we were like, yes. And she just like, you just saw that relief on her face. Like, cause she just thought she was coming up with this whole new thing and didn't know how to do it, and that nobody in the world had ever faced it. Right. And it just felt so big and so huge. And as soon as other people were like, oh yeah, we know this thing, it just was this instant drop. Right. And those communities have meant so much. And I know that like you've been a part of them. Obviously you have one in your household to be a part of, but sometimes that can be a little difficult in and of itself with a partnership. But
I originally was from the state of Delaware and really close to the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And so there was a lot of like seafood crab references and analogies all the time. And I'm not sure if you ever heard the which is a true thing, but when you're out crabbing and you catch one crab, the first one you catch in a boat, you have a little bushel in your boat, and if you put the crab in there, you have to put the lid on, because if you don't put the lid on, the crab will crawl out itself. It'll crawl out of the barrel. Now, the interesting thing is the moment that you catch the second crab, you don't have to put the lid on anymore, because the crabs will keep pulling each other down if the other one tries to escape. And I was told that back when I had my real estate company many, many years ago, because there was like a little virus in our office of the non-producing people convincing new people not to do the things. So yes, you've invested and I invested. You want to be intentional to put yourself in a peer group of people that are trying to achieve the thing that you want to achieve. Yeah. And I think just that little nuance there, I think, is really important, because sometimes we surround ourselves with our friends and our family members, sometimes a spouse, and they're not as supportive. They might actually talk down to us. They might like deflate us. They might have us focus on our imperfections instead of the opportunities. So we've been very intentional. I learned this from the real estate days, that back when I was first got into real estate, thankfully I got exposed to a mentor very early on that was not in my office. And we had 16 agents in the office that I worked for, and none of them were producing at the level that I aspired to. And this mentor that I met at a conference just said, this is the wrong room for you to be in. You need to spend some money and go down to Atlanta, Georgia to this big event, because that's where all the top agents in the world go to that event. And you need to surround yourself with those individuals. And because I did that, I accelerated very quickly.
Yeah, because a part that I would contribute to that is that if you're feeling that draw to be in there, but you still feel a little nervous, that's okay. You can still take that action, right? Because I always like laugh at myself and I say I'm an awkward duck. I will be the one that will just kind of like sit there and watch people, and I will wait. But at the same time, I mean, you hear me on the podcast, I'm fine to have engaging conversations and to talk to people. It just takes a lot to kind of get me to make that move. Yeah. And I'm slow to trust. I'm slow to like share those vulnerable things and to kind of like help people. So if you're listening and you're feeling like that and you're like, I want to be around people who aren't going to be the crabs pulling me down, but instead I'll be the one to get myself out of that little hatchy baskety thingy, whatever it's called, go for it. And then just allow yourself that time. Yeah. And honestly, I mean, like a good practice in vulnerability is to, share with people and let them know that. Say, thank you for allowing me to be here, but it might take me a little bit to feel comfortable with sharing. Right. And then just see what the room's like. And honestly, like, it's okay to leave. Like, if you end up with somebody who's not gracious, who's not open, then, just say it's not the right room for me and then find another one. Yeah. Like that's okay too. But if you're feeling like I need to be in a room like that, then find one. Cause there's so many communities to be a part of, and, and you can find your humans. Cause I like that. So we've talked about like, you having your 3 people launch, and then you're having, your case study launches, and then, the big ones that you have now. And it's been just 10 years just with you and Melissa, let alone like the past that you had before that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to kind of dive into, right? Because, we talk a lot about not comparing yourself to someone else's, like, well, just to someone else, full stop, but also like someone who's been at it, for a long time, right? If you've only been doing this like 3 or 4 times, or you have a brand new offer that you're trying to get off, and this is someone's 20th launch with the same damn thing, it's like not comparing those things. Yeah. So I want to talk about, like, how does audience size and ad strategy influence a launch versus like hinder a launch, or when you need to kind of make the right expectations and make the right allowances for it, right? Because one of the things that I really like that you do is the paid entry model for challenges, or even like the $1 thing that you guys do. So kind of talking about the real mechanics, and when they are a fun thing to experiment with, and when it's kind of like, I mean, of course, try it if you want to try it, but let's know that it might not be the gangbuster thing that you were after, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the trap that a lot of us fall in, is we follow very big influencers that have very high authority and perceived positioning to their audiences, and they have hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people on their followers or email lists and everything. And we have to give ourselves some grace that we might have 100 people on our email list, or a
Yeah.
thousand people, or 10,000 people. And on one end, business is a numbers game. And the interesting thing is to look at is that when we're smaller, we typically have more time, and we can pay more attention to real conversations with individuals. And typically we'll have a deeper relationship. So when you have a smaller, more intimate list or following, I'd say don't look at everybody as a number, look at everybody as a real human being, because what you have that the big influencer doesn't have is, like, they can't personally talk to 10,000 people, individually. So their relationship's going to be more in the shallow end of the pool. And when you're smaller and you have a smaller list, you can convert at a much higher rate typically, because you can listen, you can have conversations, you can be more in tuned in that two-way conversation, where a big influencer normally just has a one-way conversation. But the interesting thing is, I think, it's touching on a couple of the things that you were just talking about, is when we go into a launch, for us, we look at short term as well as long term. And launching in general, the concept of it, depending on the mechanism that you put, if it's a webinar, if it's a boot camp or a challenge, if it's a masterclass, like whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. They're all vehicles of launching.
Yep.
They're all way
Like they're all the same damn
influencing. Yeah,
thing.
they're just repackaging the same thing. It's just delivered in a slightly different way. And you'll just have a different part of your audience that can consume something that's 1 hour, and other people want things that are slow, over time. And you're just going to hit a different part of your audience with each of those. But at the end of the day, it's a vehicle for you to influence in an ethical manner. And for most of us, though, is we go all in on one methodology, and we're just like, this is do or die, with the launch. And then what ends up happening when we learn from these guru people is, then whether it does well or not, we get emotionally involved with it. And if we don't get the result that we want, we then don't want to do anything. We want to throw in the towel instantly and give up. And it's like, nope, we just have to get back off the ring. We have to look at it and reevaluate. But then it's like, what's the iteration for the next time? And then the next time. So those of us that have launched a lot over the years, it's because the launch did something, and then we took the feedback and we iterate it, we test it, we tweak. Now, I recommend, if you have something that's working, 80% of you, this is the old 80-20 rule. It's like 80%, go back to what works. Like, don't break the thing that's feeding your family, but take that 20% of that time, energy, Facebook ads, whatever it is, and tinker and test and try something different. Because just because we're all doing a launch a certain way doesn't necessarily mean some iteration could be better for us and also our community. So, and also there's a thing that's called promotion fatigue. in businesses in general. And that's when you're going to it's like signing up for a department store's, email. They do no nurturing whatsoever. They just tell you a sale happens today, and then there's another one that happens tomorrow, and another one happens the next day. And they're not nurturing at all. They're just bam, 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 bam. And most people don't unsubscribe from those emails, which is kind of interesting. But so they're doing perpetual daily launches to their people. And most of us don't make an offer often enough. And that's where we struggle a lot of times. But then also when we are only doing one promotion and then we have this gap of time, it's like, do you realize like a launch, like for us, a launch is our number one best list builder. So it is, it's typically, if it's a webinar, if it's a masterclass, if it's a training series, like we are giving value. It's way better than a lead magnet, than a standard lead magnet. Like we are bringing people in that are coming in. We're very specific on a transformation, a promise. And the cool thing is if somebody comes in during that launch, you're influencing them and you're training them from the moment that they come into your world that you're an expert and you sell the thing that you do for a living. Mm-hmm. And where a lot of people do what they do is they go out and they do lead magnets all day long. And then, which is, there's a place and time for it as well. Yes. But then they nurture for a year or for 6 months. And during that period of time, that human being has bought a lot of things in their life between when they came in on your email list and when you finally are launching your thing. And what we find the most common problem is that most people don't put an offer in front of their audience enough. They're afraid. They're afraid to put the offer there. But the interesting thing is in the real world, we're all human beings. And in the real world, if you go to somebody's place of business and consume, so if you go into a restaurant, you don't like sit there for free for 6 months and then decide to buy a meal. If you go to a movie theater, you don't get in the movie and watch it and then decide if you're going to pay, 3 months later. It's like, so consuming, typically it's a transaction that happens. Then we get online and we think everybody wants things for free. Well, that same human being is buying everything that they consume in the real world. And the moment they go online, we've been conditioned to think like, no, that person's not willing to pay. We have to nurture them forever. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing is when you launch and you put your thing out into the world, you do that promotion, you're shaking the tree. Like in your audience, these people were today or close to ready, willing, and able to make a purchase to solve their problem. Now, during that launch, you'll get the 2 to 3%, depending on your relationship, maybe a little bit higher. That'll say yes right now. But now you have, now you have 100 people on your email list. Now you have 500 more people on your email list. Like some of those people weren't ready, willing, able to buy today, but they might the next time you launch. So it's one of the best list builders. Not only the freebie people, which you'll get when you do lead magnets anyway, but it's also going to shake the tree for the people that are sitting in their pain right now, that are willing to invest and pay. Because in the real world, somebody that sits in front of your parking lot or sits in your place of business, when they don't buy, they're called loiterers. You normally kick them out.
Yeah, so, like, if you stay at a restaurant past 2 hours, they're like, can we have this table back, please?
Exactly.
It's like, we need to bring in someone else who's going to order things.
Yeah. So I would just say is that there's different launch levels for different people. And I definitely recommend that people try to figure out, because I know you're all about like finding your launch style and everything. And for us, we do some that are all in. And then when we do an all in one where we're bringing in affiliates or doing ads, like all the resources are all in, and those will do really well. But then right after that, the next time we launch might be within a month later, and that's a softer launch. That's something we look at as an A level, B level, C level, for us. So we mix the flow so that we put different offers, in front of people. But sometimes it is just an email only. Sometimes it's just a couple posts on social media. We know we're not going to get the results that we would on other things. But we're trying to do in our world, and that just our style is in general, is that we're looking at just like a real business. We're looking at a flywheel effect, where people are just coming into our world on a consistent basis versus going all in, like gambling, pulling the slot lever down and hoping that you win on the slot machine, and if it didn't, you're like walking away broke. And you got to wait 6 months or a year because you don't open your card opportunity, more often. I know you touched on a lot of different things there. We're just trying to cover some of the things you were talking about.
Yeah, because that one of the things that I talk about a lot is that it depends on which offer are you actually going, right? And which audience does that align with, as well as like the season of life that you personally are in.
True.
Because you'll be going through different things at different times. So maybe you need to do an email only one. Maybe you need to actually do a private sale. Maybe you don't need to be doing a launch at all, and you actually need to be concentrating more on funneling, because that's something that a lot of people often confuse. And, and funneling is for the people that are already in your world versus launching, just like you were saying, that is a way to bring people into your world, right?
Sure.
And that's part of this kind of like jargon confusion, because the people that they hear talking about it aren't taking the time to actually untangle what these concepts are about. And they just throw this stuff around and are like, all right, good luck, everybody, figure it out, or buy my thing and, I'll solve the world for you. And then they still don't explain it, right? So it's that kind of thing where it's like, what is your personal energy like? What is your audience? Where's your community at? What is the sales mechanisms that you actually want to play with, and what marketing platforms are you wanting to play with? And whenever you look at these 4 different arenas, then we can come together and we can like, all right, this is the perfect place for this one. This is the perfect way for this one. And this, and that way it's like, I know exactly what support I need. I know exactly what time frame I want. I know that, yes, I do want to bring somebody in for a longer pre-launch versus like, I'm going to do a flash sale. I'm going to go gangbusters. I'm going to, just have this and be fun. Or I'm going to have more of like that continuation evergreen style with automated ads to a replay to an email sequence. And people are just going to keep that money rolling in and keep that like interest level. And I'm going to, get these transformations and these testimonials, and that's just going to kind of like be on the back end, right? And because we have all of these different things that we get to play with, and it's not a one or the other, and that's all you get to do.
True.
But you do have to focus on one at a time until you build them. It's like you don't build them all at the same time. And and that's another part with you having done it for a while. It's like, what team do you find is almost like mandatory for these different levels and sizes, right? Because like we talk about at what point is it right to have the larger one versus the smaller one, right, in air quotes, because again, like you can experiment however you want, but like, obviously you two are already a team. But then you still have support people, you still have designers you call on, you still have VAs that you call on, you still have like all these other people that you outsource, even though you yourself are good at doing things and you yourself are good at, like you guys do the showing up, you do the writing, you do these parts, but you still also call on teams, right? So there's kind of this building versus scaling that I think a lot of people, again, they think, oh, if I want to have a launch, I have to have 15 elements, but I'm one person and I got to do it all, or I need to spend $5,000 and get a whole bunch of contractors, and I've never even made $1 in my business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think we typically in our world, we normally attract 2 main buckets of people: those that are going to pre-invest in their future success, and those that are reinvesting. Like they already hit a certain level and they're reinvesting. And I think that's true for everybody that's coming in and building their own business. And how lucky are all of we that, like, being in this online marketing space, that it's, even though it's a lot for all of us and all of us have different realities, is that if you were to build a restaurant today, like $1,500 that you would hire, like you would spend to hire like that first person is going to buy you like 1 table in your commercial restaurant, because it can't,
like
you don't want it to fall apart next month. Exactly. And it's like, and it's just like, and we're not even talking about supplies and turning electricity on and insurance,
Food,
all the other
chef.
things. And it's like, so how blessed we are that we have minimal risk involved. And at the same time, I think a lot of people come because they haven't come in. They maybe have not been self-employed before, so they don't understand the concepts of like trading off, getting your time and your energy and your emotional state back by making those financial investments. So we all want to build the house ourselves, and we probably know somebody in our lifetime that bought a piece of land and we're like, I'm going to build my own house, and it like 20 years later they're still like trying to move the ground around a little bit, and they have this vision. And that's kind of like what a lot of us are doing, is like, oh, well, if you just hired a builder, yeah, you would have had to finance it, you would have had to done these different things, but you would have brought the professionals in, and your dream would have materialized, and you would probably have been close to paying off your mortgage by now, 20 years later,
Right.
and it would have been worth it, right? And you could have been living in it the whole time. So it's just like, do we want to get there slow and also potentially not at the level? Because keep in mind, if all of us are putting something in the market, like, it's a hard thing to do, but we're kind of like being placed on the store shelf. There's a lot of people in our world, in our niches, in our markets, that are fighting for that same dollar, that same attention. And they maybe got a brand photo shoot done. Maybe they got a professional logo created for them. Maybe they hired somebody to do their website so it doesn't look like it was from the 1990s, and it doesn't look kind of mashed together a little bit, And I just see the congruency of things happening through the decades. And it's no different than many, many years ago when I had my real estate company. It's like I would be talking to some of my agents, and they were going after like the first time home buyer neighborhoods and stuff like that. And yeah, they could go to the copy machine and photocopy black and white, the thing about the house for sale, and put it in that neighborhood or whatever. But then it's like, if you're going to go over to that multi-million-dollar neighborhood, maybe you want to do like a 4-color glossy, get some professional photos done, get this designed, because you want that congruency, right? So the interesting thing, when we go out into the marketplace, how are we putting ourselves on the store shelf? Because I know if I try to create my own logo, it might look good, and my friends and family are going to be impressed by my third grade ability, and they'll pat me on the back because it's better than the last 3 that they saw. But and that goes with copy, as well. And it's like, your style, your vibe. Are you talking directly to your particular client, not just some generic market, but like the people that you would attract? And again, there's visual elements, there's written, there's verbal elements. How am I showing up? The video quality, like some of these things we can't afford to invest all at once. And we are going to slowly take over time. But at the same time, it's like, if we're trying to do everything ourselves, what ends up happening is we burn ourselves out, and we don't ever launch. We don't ever put a promotion. We don't put an offer into the market, because good, better, and different, we're trying to be, the master of everything, and we're not. Our skill set, our abilities, I can't create a high-end logo, and I need that to separate me from the rest of the marketplace. My webcam, like those listening won't see this, but it's like, it's taken years, but I finally got professional lighting, finally got, a professional camera, dual camera setup, to do this whole YouTube looking type thing with backlighting and all this other stuff. Well, I started off with the $100 webcam, for many, many years. And it was good. It was better than the $50 webcam, quality. But it's like, there's a certain point, it's like, I need to keep upping my game, and that means I have to reinvest in myself. And sometimes we have to invest here in our mind and our education, but also we have to invest. So when we look at teams, we used to have a saying in real estate many, many years ago. It's like, if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant.
Yeah. And
it was kind of a harsh thing to always say, but it was like, okay, am I running around? If I'm positioning myself to be, a 6-figure year or 7-figure year earner, what is my value per hour boil down to? And am I doing that type of work in my business? Or am I spending most of my time doing $5, $10, $20 an hour work? Should I be outsourcing that? Because if you're doing $20 an hour work, and it's respectful work, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you're looking to be paid at $500 an hour, you're not going to get there if you're always in the weeds on things that you could outsource. And you touched on it. So for us, I wake up every day and I don't know what's on my schedule, because that's not my job to know the calendar. I'm given a note every day that says, here's your calls, here's where you need to be, here's the links. In most cases, those links get to me, but it's like, that's not the important element. It's for me to show up on, podcasts like this, or be coaching with one of our clients, helping people out directly, being on a discovery call with somebody that wants to come into our world. That's where my time and space needs to be. But right now, as we're even talking and recording this, there's most likely somebody that's emailing our account that's saying, hey, I can't log in how do I reset my password, or how do I
Mhm.
change my credit card? There's emails that are being scheduled probably right now for our next launch, or being written for our next launch. There's Facebook graphics that are being created right now that I don't have to think about. That there are other people that do their thing incredibly well that make us look more professional and better. And because we have all those things put into play, that's why I'm able to go into a launch with less stress, because we have these other team members that are doing the thing they do incredibly well. And at the end of the day, I also come back to, I was very poor growing up. Been homeless 3 times in my life. I used to beg for food when I was a kid. My parents were drug addicts, unfortunately, back then, and it was really tough. And I just learned along the way about being resilient and about leaning in and not expecting other people to do things, for you. So, and also, I'm not afraid of the outcome. So, not being emotionally attached to the outcome, and also learning very quickly that there are other people out there. Like, I learned when I was younger how to fix the brakes and rebuild a motor. Like, my stepdad showed me how to rebuild motors, transmissions, things like that. And when you get to a certain point in life, you realize, like, oh, I know it doesn't cost that much money to actually do the thing, like, change my brakes, but I'm willing these days to pay
Yeah.
the hundreds of dollars so I don't get my hands dirty and messed up. So just because you know how to do the thing doesn't necessarily mean you need to be doing it.
Yeah.
There's somebody else that is willing to get their hands dirty for you, and it gives you the time and space. So I'm on this call when somebody else is changing the brakes, type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
it
and it
has
gives,
to get done and it's
yeah,
vital work, but who needs to be the one doing it, right?
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's
that's the
good.
part that it comes down to for, those questions that come up, right? Because
Sure.
it all comes together, but there's so many moving pieces that it's way too easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It's way too easy to just look at all of it. And I mean, by now, all these pieces and you could probably spout them off really quickly. But if you had to think about which ones to do when and how, and, every 6 minutes and all the minute parts, it could still, even 10, 15, 20 years later, be like, okay, hang on, I got to take a minute. That's still, it's like, it's so many moving pieces. And so even though you have humans to do it, right?
Sure.
Like that's just human nature to feel a bit taken over by the vast amount of stuff that needs to be done, and all of the people that are counting on you just to kind of it's like being a parent and being like, okay, every single thing about keeping this child alive is on me. Hang on, give me a minute. I got to go to the closet. It's like, I need to go breathe deep for a minute and then I'll be okay. It's like, all right, all they asked for right now were goldfish and then we can move on. Okay. Like,
Well, thankfully, launches are not that complicated.
right. I mean, it can feel like it, it can feel like it. And so it's like, if you look back over all of this time,
Yeah.
is there anything that you would have done differently as you've been developing and coming to where you are? Are you one of those, like holistic, it all took to getting here, or, like where it all kind of built on itself? Or is there any sort of like pieces of wisdom or things that you just want to kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm not saying this right, but it's like, if you were 107 and you were sitting there on the front porch and telling, the little kids who were about to do this for the first time, is there like that kind of wise, great grandpa wisdom that you would want to give them? Does that
Oh,
make
yeah.
sense?
Yeah. This might have to be another episode because I got a lot of perspective, especially going from a very poor background, becoming a multimillionaire, to losing everything and having to restart all over again. This season that I'm in, we've been way more intentional with our decisions.
Mhm.
Not every decision you make, whether it's in your business, in your life, as well as when you do a launch, not every decision is permanent. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, I have to get this perfect and I have to get it perfectly aligned before I do anything. And they get in that paralysis, state, and they don't just take an action. But we've have offers that made us incredible amount of money, years ago that don't even exist in the marketplace today.
Mm.
We have other opportunities where they were a total mess originally. And years later, we went back with new perspective, new education, new eyes, and went back and said, hey, let's try that thing again that flopped many years ago. But I think how we would approach it today, we would do it totally different than
Nice.
what we did years ago. I think being not emotionally attached to the outcome is the easy thing to say. It's a hard thing to practice, but
Mm.
you will accomplish more. I used to tell everybody, in different workshops, things I do is like all the abundance in my lifetime, because this is the third time in my life that I've created a seven-figure year business, and all three times have been in completely different industries. And it's like it's not because I was the smartest person. It's not, but it was like in every scenario, I was willing to go a couple inches out of my comfort zone. So it's like in that safe space that we all stay in, that's familiar, that's complacency, that's again, hanging out with our existing and past friends that are willing to tell us that the logo looks cool and you did a good job, even though that they want to really say like you should get somebody else to do it. You know, so we don't want those the crab, people in our lives. That's going to be the theme of this.
It is. It
It-
is. I can see it in my mind too, where it's like the little crabs like pulling you down.
Yeah. But it's like we want people that are going to lift us. And coming back to also something that you said earlier on that I think I just wanted to loop back to is that when I was in school, I was an extreme introvert. I to the point that when a teacher in grade school, when they would call, when they would be like, oh, we're reading a story and everybody reads a paragraph.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I could count down as it was coming to be my turn, and I would
yeah,
fake that I had to go to the restroom to
yeah.
get around it. I could read, but what it was, I felt like a thousand eyeballs were on me. I would start stuttering and like getting in my head and skipping words and sentences and convulsing almost. But this is something that was out of my comfort zone. So instead of allowing me to be labeled my entire life that I was an introvert, I decided to lean in on it and say, okay, I need to go 2 inches out of my comfort zone, because then that normalizes at a certain point.
Mm.
And then you can go 2 more inches out of your comfort. You don't have to do this big, huge thing. But it's just like, what's that little resistance that we all have? That is a growth moment. You're molting out of the old shell, going back to the crustacean references here, and
Right.
you're going in, and you're going into a new version of yourself. So just all the abundance in my life has always been a couple inches outside my comfort zone. And I just recommend anybody that if it feels a little uncomfortable, that just recognize and celebrate that you're growing
Yep.
in that moment and you're trying and doing something new. You're not staying comfortable. You're not staying
Yep.
complacent. The only people, as they say, the only people that make mistakes are the people that try something new. So I would just say, and then put something out in the market. And the best marketing advice that I got many, many years ago is just put it in the market and the market will give you feedback. So the best thing we can all do is put something into the marketplace by launching, by promoting, by putting something out there. And then we'll know if we have the right alignment with the audience. We'll know if we have the right messaging, and we'll know if it's the right offer that they already desire or not. And then we can come back and we can tinker and then put it back out again until it hits. But there's just a lot of things I've learned in my life, especially business life, coming up and down. But at the end of the day, for us, Melissa and I are in that season. It's grace and ease. And we're very intentional with protecting our time and our energy. And that comes with us trading off. We hire professionals to come in and coach and help support like our community, our members, and the people that we help out. That way it gives Melissa and I more time freedom and less stress for us having to show up and be that person all the time. And that comes through trust and, giving up that ego and allowing other people to shine, in your world as well. That's just a different growth moment that most people will get to at some point in their journey.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the guest coaching part. It's fun, I feel
Yeah.
like it's like being the auntie of the group, and because it's like you hear things that other people don't, and you see different sides of it. I think it's fun. But yes, and on the 2 inch thing, I love that part because we have a saying around here where it's like, it may feel new, it may feel different, but I'm safe. It's like leaning into those butterflies in your stomach, right? It's like, that's okay. That can be excitement and exhilaration as opposed to being like fear and that upset stomach part, right? Because like when you're talking about, oh gosh, it's almost my time to read, and you feel like, oh, I'm going to be sick. Well, that can also just be an excitement feeling. That's just your body's response to those kind of stimuli, right? But you can interpret it however you need to. And so if you're like, okay, this may be new, this may be different, but I'm safe. It's like, okay, let's go for it. Let's see what's going to happen. And it can just be that little bit, just that little bit. So just think those 2 inches, it's all you got to do to get yourself out of that little crabby, cagey thing. I really wish I could remember what that thing was called. I'm like, you said it. I can't remember.
Bushel, the bushel.
The bushel. Okay. All right. The bushel. Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting. And you just said something real quick. Years ago, a friend of ours up in New York, her name is Sammy. This is back when I was in the photographer world for a little bit, which we really didn't cover here, but we were doing a branding photo shoot for her at the time. And she just said, oh my goodness, because she looked at her photos and she was happy, but she says, I'm so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then we take that word as like a negative word. And we were like, really? Are you okay? And she's like, no. I'm really excited. Yeah. Overwhelmed means excited, and I was just like, oh, what an awesome way to reframe, a word. So when you have those butterfly feelings or whatever, it's like, instead of looking at it negatively, just reframing and like what that really means, I think is very powerful. And we all have that ability to do that in a moment if we want to.
Exactly right. It's just giving yourself that little space in between before you label it, because you can be overwhelmed with joy. Right. True. Thinking again, like whenever you were saying being a parent earlier, the first time you see that baby and it's like, oh God, it's just that little inflection. It makes all the difference in the world, right? It's like, true. You're not ready, but here you go, and it's that overwhelmed with joy moment that comes in. Yes. So thank you very much for being here and sharing what it's been like and what this journey has been like, because launching is something that we're always going to need to do. Right. Sure. So it's a matter of just realizing that it's a promotional campaign. It's that beautiful intersection of marketing and sales. Sure. And it really is an opportunity to let our business shine. It's that glamorous time for us. And it doesn't have to be anything that feels burdening or anything that feels like, really hard. And that we get to create something that works for us and for our offers and, for our audience, most importantly, and where we're at, in our lives. Because we talked about the testing part, the tweaking part, and all the stuff that's happened, over the years. And I just love hearing like how you've figured out the different parts that have fit as you've kind of fluctuated through all of that. And for those that are listening, if you want to find your launch style and you want to figure out what is your way of doing it without going through 10 or 15 years of trial and error, well, we can cut through some of that and we can find it now, because the doors are open. So feel free to head over to tracypatterson.com/YLS, and I will see you inside of the program. Thank you again, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Launch Style Stories, and I hope it sparked something for you. If you've been listening and thinking, I need to find my way to launch without burning out, second guessing, or forcing myself into someone else's formula, well, that's exactly what Your Launch Style is here to help with. Inside the program, we cut the trial and error and help you create a launch approach that fits your strengths, your business, and your energy, so selling never feels like an uphill battle again. Head to tracypatterson.com/YLS to learn more and join us. And if you loved this series, let me know. Share your biggest takeaway, DM me, or leave a review. It helps more business owners like you find the show. I'll see you inside Your Launch Style.